Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Salmon's Pizzeria. This is your slice of Scottish football, and today, slightly different episode. We did do one of these for the Scotland National Roundup before, due to conflicting schedules, as happens in the world of Scottish football and the world of Scottish podding. We are going to split this up into segments. So instead of an hour-long episode of four guests all talking about the games, we are going to have sort of recordings from each guest as they come in. I'll introduce each one, explain the match they're going to cover, and we'll do it that way. So hopefully it'll be much more pleasure for your ears instead of seeing our ugly mugs at times, and we can just get straight into it. I am your host, Stuart, and I will be covering the first game for you, which was Ross County 0, Rangers 3. So up to Dingwall then for the Ross County Rangers game, as I mentioned there, and it was a bit of a, I wouldn't say surprise selection, but I think when we've gone so long with Philippe Clement picking Dessers, picking the similar teams, Barami out left, which he feels very, very wasted out there as a natural number 10. Couldn't get in all that time in 10 because of Tom Lawrence. Tom Lawrence gets injured. He still can't get in. Hadji's come back. He still can't get in because Hadji's now taking that 10 spot. It's been very difficult, I think, for Barami. Still shown sparks of excellence at time, but he is playing out of position and he's not going to be at full capacity where he's playing. So I think it was the right move from Clement to stick with the Danilo and Igaman um, sort of formation where Igaman seems to be going out left, although he seems to be playing more of a free role where he can drift in and sort of do what he wants. He's a bit of a wild card, and I want to come more on to Igaman and what he brings to Rangers. But as I say, Clement lined up with those two again. James Tavernier keeping his place at right back despite Sterling coming back. There was no change there. Of course, Tavernier did very well in the previous game, but it was always going to be, you know, we how long can we see a decent Tav, because it's been a case of his powers are on the wane, and the age is catching up to him, as it does to every player eventually. The legs are going, but to be fair to him, he was much improved since he's come back in the team. So he was obviously looking to carry that on. John Suter has been in excellent form for Rangers and Scotland. So it was a very interesting lineup. It obviously coming in with a lot of confidence now that the goals are finally flowing for Rangers. They've gone so long. It's one of the lowest scorers in the league, which would be unacceptable for any Rangers team. Defensively, in terms of numbers, when in goals conceded, have been pretty good. But if the goals aren't coming up the other end, it's not making a huge impact on the league. And of course, that's why they fell so far behind Aberdeen. It was always going to be a tough game going up to Dingwall. Of course, the title sort of, I wouldn't say slipped from Rangers' hands last season, because you couldn't say that by winning in Dingwall they would have gone on to win the league or anything. But I think it was a big sliding doors moment in that title race when Ross County, of course, defeated Rangers in Dingwall. So it was always going to be a big test, especially a much improved Ross County this season under Don Cowie. They've certainly at home they look a real threat. Only Celtic and Aberdeen have gone there in the league and defeated them, and both of those were very, very late goals. The Celtic one obviously was a little bit controversial in terms of the free kick that was given for Celtic that led to the goal. But Celtic can harm you all over the pitch, and if you don't switch on like Ross County did, or didn't, then they'll punish you. And Aberdeen the same. Kevin Nisbet with that very, very, very late goal to keep their run going at the time. So it was always going to be a big test for Clement's side, and whether or not that sort of confidence and a bit of spark that Igaman had brought into the team was going to carry on really. But off to the perfect start, ball out left, and I think it's Yefty who cuts it back to Igaman. First time hit. I think at the time it looked like it took a wicked deflection. Upon closer inspection, I think it takes a slight nick. It's a great strike from Igaman, and he's a 21, 22-year-old lad from Morocco that's come in and struggled with injury the moment he comes in. And I mean, you could say that about a lot of Rangers players really, but he has sort of really adapted well, I think, in terms of from where he was the first couple of games we saw him to where he is now. He's very, very raw, and I think you can see that, but he's also got a lot of talent. Does remind me a little bit of Morelos from when he first come in, and that sort of level improvement we saw, but it's happening at a faster rate, and it could all come crashing down again. But he certainly has that talent, I think, and he has that ability. It's whether or not it can all come together on a consistent basis, which is, what we're gonna see over the coming weeks, months, potentially years. But I think he's got a lot of talent. Um, so yeah, Rangers going 1-0 up through that. And then a moment of shakiness from Jack Butland at the back, of course, where he's done it once in Europe, and he got away with it for a foul, which I think he was very lucky to get away with, in all honesty. But again, he sort of just dawdles on the ball for some reason, and then he gets it stuck under his feet, and he almost loses out on that one. And it's one of these things, you're trying to, not many keepers are excellent keepers and good ball playing keepers, and I certainly don't think Butland's skill is with his feet. I prefer to see him just lump those long up the pitch because he's got a hell of a kick on him, and if we can get into a position where you've got players flicking those on, or it can just cause a bit of chaos being able to hit the ball that high up the pitch. I don't like this messing about with it at feet, certainly when you're a keeper that is not renowned for doing that. So Rangers maybe got away with one a little bit there, and then sort of complete opposite ends of the spectrum. The ball goes back to Jack Hamilton, and he just takes that heavy touch, and I think it's fair play to Danilo, who realizes he's taken a heavy touch, because you see he's sort of going to close him down. The moment he sees that heavy touch, he's on it in a flash, and he's there to close down. You have to get lucky there with the ricochet. He does get lucky. You have to feel sorry for Jack Hamilton there, but all of a sudden the pressure is completely off Rangers nice and early into the game. They're 2-0 up. It's absolute dreamland. And, you know, at that point you can push on, you can try new things. The confidence is flowing through the team again. Dare I say it, you could saw a little bit of a star from Rangers. And then it just hit a lull, I think. And I think it will do, because this team, I hate to hear Clement say they're still gelling, they're still a rebuild, but you can see it certainly when you're changing partnerships, whether that's in defence or in the centre of midfield. It will take time to come together, and I think it is coming together. Whether or not Clement is right long term, I'm still unsure. But I think the players, there's enough good players there that something can be built with this team. Whether that's going to be a title challenging team at any point, I highly doubt. I think it would need a lot of improvement. But overall, it is improving to a very good level. Certainly a level that should be able to go on and take second relatively comfortably. And then yeah, the half time whistle comes, probably at a happy point for Rangers, that they're struggling a little bit, I think, in the centre of the pitch at that point. But the second half kicks off, and I think it's completely changed. I think the intensity came back a little bit. Yefty and Igaman really, really link up well. Flip side, on the right hand side, where I think Tavernier and Cherney are completely unbalanced. I don't think they link up well at all. And I think that a lot of that comes from Tavernier maybe doesn't have that ability to bomb on anymore. Or whether I mean, he might still have the ability, but he just doesn't seem to do it. Whether he doesn't trust his own legs, I'm not too sure. Excuse me. He doesn't do that as much as he used to, and I think we all know that Tavernier's frailties in defence. If he can't give you that attacking output, then I'm not sure what he's given you, apart from he's popped up with a goal today, of course. But he made me eat my words. I didn't think he was having a good game. I know he got in a BBC's Team of the Week, which I thought was a bit over the top, if I'm completely honest. I don't think he had a particularly good game. I just think, he didn't make any mistakes, which I think at the moment for Tavernier is seen as a good game. But I do think that he is partly responsible for Cherney's bad game. That said, Chen did just have a bad game as well. You can't just blame Tavernier. You can't blame anyone else when you have a bad game. So I do understand that. I just think putting pace around Cherney overlaps, that's what gives him his power, because he can use that overlap to come inside. And, you know, um, when that overlap, or not overlap, but when the right back is close to him, he can link up with him. He can then go on the outside and have the right back come inside. So I think that's going to be something to work on. I don't think it's impossible for it to work with Tav. It's just maybe going to have to tweak a way of making that work, because they sort of got in each other's way a couple of times, I thought there. Overall, though, I thought it was a very good performance. It's a fantastic goal from Tavernier just to round things off. Really good technique to find that bottom corner. Dessers comes on, and to be fair, I thought he worked quite hard. I thought, he's seen we've seen a little bit of a stroppy side to Dessers, I think, lately, and not necessarily because he's out of the team. I think we saw this on the pitch when he was in the team. I'm not sure what's causing that. I don't know if it's the um, frustration from the fans with how Rangers have been playing and sort of the how far they've fallen behind in the league. We've seen that sort of maybe transfer to Dessers a little bit, and he's seen he seemed a little petulant on the pitch at times. But I think since he's had a little bit of time on the bench, he's coming on, he's working hard for the team, and I think in terms of what he's going to give back to Rangers at this point, if he's going to be a substitute like that, I think that's a good position for Rangers. To have a player like him come off the bench and work hard, he can run himself into the ground. That said, at sort of 29, 30 years old on a big wage, can you afford to have a player like that on your bench? Probably not in the position Rangers are in. So that's going to be a question mark down the line. But overall, I think there are still question marks around that team, and it's a massive, massive week. Of course, there was a lot of controversy around Clement's answers in the press conference and saying that mentioning finances and things like that, which I think is a fair point when you're talking about Spurs. That said, Spurs have drawn and lost their last two Europa League games, so they're not untouchable. They're in a bad run of form. I think their style is probably a mismatch for Rangers, and they are still quality. But I don't. I could maybe understand the financial thing a little bit to take the pressure off the players, but saying it about Celtic is an absolute no-no because yes, Celtic are far superior than Rangers at this moment in time. They can spend far more money. That's not Celtic's fault. That's good management. But also, in terms of wages, certainly last season, there was not a huge difference in wages. And even though Rangers have dropped the wage bill this season, you know, I don't think there's going to be a bigger difference between, you know, Celtic and Rangers than there is Rangers to the rest of the league or something like that. So I felt it was maybe looking for a bit of an excuse because he's finally hit a good run and he maybe doesn't want to sort of lose a bit of that belief that the fans have got back in him, maybe. Maybe trying to get those excuses in too early, which I'm not a massive fan of. But like I said, it's a huge week for Rangers. If they could somehow find a win over Spurs, then they could be looking very good for top eight in the Europa League. But obviously, the big one is the cup final, which I would probably say at this point they have to win. Rangers really need some silverware, and there's not going to be too many chances to get it this season. You think the League Cup and the Scottish Cup are going to be the two big ones, and um, it's maybe a chance to put a dent in the form that Celtic are in, but we'll have to wait and see for that one. So it did finish Ross County nil, Rangers 3. In terms of county, not games they're going to judge themselves on, is it? They've started the season fairly well, and I think that in terms of what they've done so far is been excellent. And if they can keep this home form outside of the late goals they lost to Celtic and Aberdeen and this sort of maybe one off against Rangers, I think they'll be absolutely fine this season. I think their plan is to not get dragged into that 11th, 12th battle again, and I think they're well on course for that. That said, there are some very good teams below them, so the quicker you can put points on the board, the better there. But yeah, that's the roundup of Ross County and Rangers. Next up, we are going to have Jenna, who has got all the details on the Motherwell's last gasp win against St Mirren. So take it away, Jenna.
With Mull against St Mirren, it was a bit of a weird game to be honest. Watching it in the stands, the first half St Mirren were all overs. They were by far the better team, and I don't mind admitting that. To be honest, we were just a bit blasé behind the ball. To be honest, the way to really describe it, I can't remember really having any notable shots worth remembering. To be honest, in the first half, don't get me wrong, Oxford had to make a good couple of saves just to stop putting St Mirren ahead. They were playing quite good. Don't get me wrong, like with Motherwell, we're a weird team. It's like it's not necessarily that we play bad. It's more of a case of that we play lazy, and that's how it kind of felt a bit. Going into the second half, we'd really put our feet down and went, no, we need to kick this game into action. We need to get something from this, which we did quite well. Like We got a good couple more chances. There was quite a few ones that should have went in, and I'm absolutely boggled by how they didn't, to be honest. The goal was definitely coming. It just felt as if both teams could have played all day and neither of us could have scored, to be honest. But then, obviously, with the dying minutes of the game, Tony Watt put us ahead, and of course, it just had to be Tony Watt playing against his former team, celebrating, which take notes, Andy Halliday. But no, jokes aside with that, though, it was a brilliant goal, to be honest. Watching the stands, I didn't even realise it was Tony that scored it until everyone started chanting his name. I thought the cross from Miller went directly into the net. I'd seen Tony go down for it, but I couldn't tell if he'd actually headed it in right or not, if it just like maybe got in front of him just because the angle where my seat was. But it was a cracking goal. I've got no complaints when it comes to that. He's been choking to get his first goal back at the club. I've been choking for him to get it. I'm a Tony Watt apologist forever and always. But it's just one. I'm struggling here not to repeat myself, really, to be honest. Like, I'm glad it was 3 points we desperately needed. We should have got 6 for 6 from the Dundee game and then that. But we've got Dundee United at First Park on Saturday. That's a big one for us. Again, that's an absolute must win for us. We were playing everyone that were close to the table now. Dundee United, St Mirren, they're all quite close to us now. It's these types of games that I think, to be honest, will determine if we do get top six or Europe or anything like that. So fingers crossed we can get a good wee result going and we can end up climbing the table and we can avoid that 10 game slump that I always chapeau about in my BBC columns. Shameless plug there, I know, right? But if we can avoid the 10 game slump that we get every year, then we'll be cooking.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jenna. And there you go, Tony. If you'll excuse the pun, what a winner that was for Motherwell. Massive result over St Mirren, and one they really needed. Been a bit of a lull themselves, haven't they? Really, Motherwell. So great result for them. Next up, I'm delighted to say that we have got Matty from the Hibs podcast Longbangers. If you haven't heard it yet, do check it out at Longbangers on Twitter, and probably everywhere else. It's an excellent podcast. But here is Matty with his thoughts on a 3-0 defeat by Celtic, but one that maybe could have gone slightly differently if chances had been taken. So take it away, Matty.
It was a bit of a frustrating afternoon for Hibs on Saturday at Parkhead. It was one of these games where the performance probably far exceeded what we expected to happen. It's always a difficult place to go, and I think going into the game, Celtic had been putting 4 and 5 past teams, whereas Hibs had been scoring a game but still conceding. Um, so it was difficult to tell what we were going to get. Obviously, we've not got a great record like most teams at Celtic Park, but I think for the first time in ages, Hibs created some really clear-cut chances. And if it wasn't for really poor finishing from Mikola Kukrevich, we probably could have been 1 or 2 up. But by the time Celtic scored their first goal, which is mad considering they scored after 5 minutes. But again, it was the sort of mistakes in defence that we saw for Hibs the 2 times that we played Celtic earlier in the season, with early goals coming in all the games, and it was probably the most annoying thing over and above the not taking our chances was the fact that we switch off again. We've got Lewis Miller and Nectar Chiana is not really tracking the runner. Alistair Johnstone gets too much space out on our left hand side to get the cross in, and then before you know it, we're a goal down. And this is despite having sort of 2 really good chances to score before it. But I was impressed that the team kept the head. We could have went behind just after it when McCowan hit the crossbar after Maida cut the ball back to him. But other than that, Celtic didn't really trouble us until later on in the first half. Joe Newell had a great chance for Hibs. How he's managed to miss the target from that range, I'll never know, because it was set up perfectly for him by Lewis Miller, who did really well to kind of exploit the space in behind Celtic's defence. And really, that space in behind the defence was Hibs' biggest opportunity to take something for the game. There was a few times we got in behind. Kukrevich, that I mentioned before, had really the 2 best chances of the game as he's gone clean through with the keeper. And although Schmeichel's done well to save them, I don't think either of them are particularly great saves. They are saves that you'd expect a goalkeeper to make. Eliuan nearly scored after McCowan was short with a back pass. I think he was a wee bit unlucky, and then the ball broke to Nicky Cadden he smashed it, and Schmeichel did make a good save for that one. And then Celtic just did what Celtic do. They kind of got a series of corners. Joe Newell scores the own goal, and then Chanta switches off in midfield for the third goal that Celtic scored. But it's a brilliant finish for Kyogo, and I kind of loath to take any credit away from him by blaming the Hibs defenders, because I think if Messi had scored that goal, everybody would be talking about it for ages. It was an absolutely brilliant finish for the boy. So it was disappointing for the Hibs' point of view. It's not often that we'll go to Celtic Park and create that many chances and that many clear cut chances. That I've not seen the XG stats, but I think Hibs wouldn't be far off what either being slightly in front of Celtic or at least equal with them on the XG in the afternoon. I think the important thing for Hibs is that they take confidence and that momentum into the next game against Ross County, because that's now like a proper 6 pointer. If we lose on Saturday at home to Ross County, then I think Hibs are in serious trouble for the season. We're sort of approaching the time of the season where the teams that are at the bottom probably know they're going to be at the bottom until the end of the season. So Hibs need some points on the board. If we beat Ross County, I think we can go up to 8th, and then things start to ease off and maybe get a wee bit easier for David Gray as well. So take the positives from Celtic Park, try to work on the negatives, which was the sloppy defending, work on the finishing through the week, and then hopefully take out the frustrations against Ross County on Saturday.
Well, thank you very much, Matty. And there you have it. Um, if Kukurevich could finish as we've seen him do many times in the past, it could have been a different story. Probably not. We've seen Celtic's recovery powers, but who knows? It was certainly an interesting one, and maybe a sign that you can get out Celtic, you can get in behind, but can you take the chances? 4 goals conceded all season for Celtic. They're on a remarkable run, and doesn't really show signs of letting up just yet for Hibs. Maybe a confidence boost in their fight to start creeping back up the table. But as I said, thank you very much to Matty. Next, we are going to head over to Alex, who covered the Dundee United versus Kilmarnock draw. I'm sure he'll go into it about how whenever these two teams meet, it can be a bit of a late drama sort of match. And this one, of course, did not disappoint. So take it away, Alex.
Yeah, so it was a fascinating game at Tannadice on Saturday between Dundee United and Kilmarnock. Always does seem to be the case when Killie play either of the Dundee sides, mostly Dundee, but certainly true of United in recent times. It tends to be a bit of a thriller, or it tends to be a lot of late drama, and Saturday was no different. I mean, I think United started off excellently in the first half. It was obviously 0-0 at the break, but there was a number of good chances hitting the post early on. And a number of really dangerous balls. I think the combo of Sam Dalby and Louis Moult up front really brought a new dynamic to United. Obviously, Louis Moult coming back from a long term injury, but it does show. It did feel slightly different style of play. Obviously, the wind was affecting the things, but not too much in the first half. Actually, quite surprisingly, United kept the ball on the deck and were really able to move the ball through Kilmarnock quite easily, actually, at times. And even playing the two up front obviously added to that new dimension, which Killie's defence really seemed to struggle with. And the benefits of it did seem to unlock sort of balls out wide for United. At one point, Manuel Odubaiega ended up coming back from deep to kind of be that overlapping man on the right hand side. Kevin Holt tried it a couple of times as well, and it did look to be working. Obviously, it was 0-0 at the break. I think Killie were probably quite lucky to escape it being 0-0 at the break. I think even Kilmarnock fans would probably admit that. Second half, it was a lot different. I think it was a lot more even. Killie had a lot more of the ball. They did have. It did feel that they had probably an even number of chances in the second half. Obviously, they made changes. There was a slight change in shape. Obviously, the goalkeeper had come off as well, which did break up the game quite a bit, and obviously it looked like a bit of a bad one for McCrory. So hopefully he's not out for too long. But yeah, Sam Dalby managed to get a 6th goal of the season, 6th goal of the Premiership season anyway. On the 79th minute, after a fantastic effort from Babinski was parried by substitute goalkeeper O'Hara right into the path of the Irish talisman, who managed to just knock it away. At that point, it did look like United were just going to kind of sail away into the sunset for another victory. I think if you look at the expected goals, I think they amassed something like 2.5 xg. There was a number of chances, both at 1-0 and at 0-0. I think even Louis Moult had one that he really should have scored from about 6 yards out. But it wasn't to be. I mean, it was another contentious penalty decision where Richard O'Dada, who'd came on and had probably not his best game coming on, made a few mistakes, and he caught that. I think he caught Danny Armstrong on the edge of the box. So it wasn't Danny Armstrong he caught. I can't remember who it was he caught. But he did catch a player on the edge of the box. And similar to the whole, similar to the penalty from last week at Tannadice team St Mirren Dundee United, VAR had judged to award a penalty, which was dispatched pretty well by Bruce Anderson right into the top corner. Jack Walton really doesn't have a chance of saving that. So it did end up 1-1. There was obviously the number of other contentious points during the game. I think there was a penalty claim for United, which I didn't really think was much of a penalty. It was when the keeper came out and seemed to clatter. I'm actually not sure who he clattered. I think it was Sam Dalby clattered in the right in the pus, but I think it's one of these ones there. If the keeper goes for it, realistically, probably not a penalty. But the one decision which did seem to really stick in my craw was Danny Armstrong's sliding tackle on Will Ferry. I think this was a straight red. It's a pretty horrible challenge if you look up. Didn't make sports and highlights for some reason, but basically slides in and his lower foot obviously catches. Doesn't catch him, but his upper foot it's a bit of a kind of lunge into the a kind of a World Cup style. If you think the 2010 World Cup final style lunge right into the lower leg, and it's very high. So I'm quite surprised that VAR didn't look at it. It wasn't awarded as a free kick or a yellow card either. I don't think at the time. So I was quite surprised by that. When I had quite a good view of it from where I sit, Tannis, and I thought it was a pretty bad tackle. But I think it's quite interesting to see where both sides are now in the season. I think it's a very important point for Killie, obviously coming off the back of the 6-0 defeat, and given that they weathered the storm in the first half, they did really push their luck in that first half at times. I think if they'd conceded one early on, it could have been another cricket score for them. But coming back from behind to get that point, which they certainly deserved the goal at the game for what they put into it. It gives them hopefully some, from their point of view, an impetus to kind of kickstart the season. Obviously, they've got Hearts next up, which is going to be tricky for them. But they are the side that kind of finds themselves in danger, given that Hearts and Hibs have both seemingly turned corners, or certainly look like they have turned a bit of a corner in recent weeks. So they are now the side that are in a bit of trouble. For United, it's another point to board, another game unbeaten. I think disappointing was definitely the feeling at full time, given the level of performance to not win that game. Now the game against Motherwell becomes quite a big one next weekend. Away at Fir Park, where United have lost the season. United haven't beat Motherwell, lost both times, and I think United are now in a place where I think these sort of games are really going to define the season. Will it be a fight for Europe, or will it just be a kind of a mid-table season with maybe a top 6 place? So I think it's going to be interesting to see how Goodwin reacts to the disappointment of the late equaliser. Again, though, it's another game where United's defence did look pretty good throughout. I think Emmanuel Adebayoga was awarded man of the match by Dundee United sponsors. I think that's absolutely correct. He was absolutely fantastic once again, and United defensively looked great. I mean, the starting 11 were absolutely Tim Goodwin didn't need to make any changes to that starting 11 until about the 81st or 82nd minute, when he brought in O'Dada on, and I think that was, you could argue that was maybe the mistake, was to bring O'Dada on, because obviously he gave away the penalty and actually could have been sent off, given he'd committed I think 4 fouls in the last 10 minutes. But it does look like it's going to be very interesting for United to see how they react to it, and how Goodwin manages to get the players motivated again for the trip to Fir Park on Saturday. But it's certainly another interesting game in the Scottish Premiership that seems to be full of interesting games this season.
Well, thank you, Alex, for that analysis on the late draw. Dundee United 1, Killy 1, Bruce Anderson's penalty cancelling out Sam Dolby's goal there. Where should we go to next? Let's go over to Tynecastle and our Dundee correspondent or Dundee expert, the fantastic Ethan, who, if you recognise his voice, it's because you may have listened to Dundee TV at some point and you would have heard him on commentary. But Ethan was there to tell us all about how Hearts gained a valuable 3 points. Lawrence Shankland finally found his shooting boots. Unfortunately, it was against Ethan's Dundee, but here's Ethan to tell you all about that.
So, Hearts versus Dundee. Where do I start with this? Well, to begin with, it was a kind of game where I expected Hearts to come out the traps pretty positively. From what I've seen them this season, they start games well, but then maybe kind of fade out as the game progresses. And I felt that was going to be the case. You could kind of tell early on, Hearts starting off on the front foot. And I said that. I said in the mic for DTV that Dundee are just going to have to weather the storm to begin with. And, I think come 22 minutes, maybe it was slightly later than 22 minutes, but, it wasn't all that long until Hearts were 2-0 up. Shankland on the double. Trust Lawrence Shankland, who's been goalless, with the one goal all season. And suddenly he pops up with 2 against Dundee. That was just written in the stars, wasn't it? But from the Dundee perspective, under Tony Docherty, we've been fully deserving of our praise for not just being a good footballing side, playing attractive football and getting results, but I think as well for producing some very good players along the way too. I mean, everyone can look across and see the likes of Luke McCowan, Lyle Cameron. They're the names that immediately come to mind. But this was a case where a very rare occasion we've had a very uncharacteristic performance from the Tony Docherty side, really. We went there and we never looked like we were going to compete. Normally when we get beat, we at least go toe-to-toe for a phase or so. There was none of that. Craig Gordon wasn't tested. The stats speak for themselves. There was no shots registered on target. So, yeah, it's even speaking about it now, it's still a bit of a bitter pill to swallow that way. There's a way to lose. And for me, I think Dundee, I wouldn't go as far and say that they've damaged their reputation by any means. I think it was just a bad day at the office. I think they will react. They will have better performances. I still have confidence that we'll actually end the year pretty strong, but it's still just it sits quite bad with me. At Hearts won just 2-0 and we put up a decent fight. I wouldn't have too many complaints, but I'm left here kind of sulking that, well, that was a real chance to go do something. Hearts were bottom of the league. They hadn't won at Tynecastle since the middle of October. We were in a very good vein of form coming into this game. I think unbeaten in 3 or 4. We won the last 2 home games, or 3 home games. 3 consecutive home victories. Away on the road, we avoided defeat at Rugby Park. And you think, well, there's a real chance we can go there and put a good fight, give a good count of ourselves, especially given some of the injuries that have hit Hearts. There was no Benny Beningame, there was no Stephen Kingsley. Frankie Kent was completely absent from the squad as well. So some things were beginning to shape up to look in our favour. But, in my life supporting Dundee, we never follow through with the momentum. I actually said to a friend of mine, Hearts fan, I said, if you think about this game in the build-up, Lawrence Shankland is completely void of confidence. Lyle Cameron will be keen to put on a show. Hearts, as mentioned earlier, bottom of the league. Dundee, high-flying form. So it was only going to end one way. Of course it was going to end with a Hearts victory. It just had to. But enough about Dundee and more about Hearts, because what people really need to kind of grasp about this performance was Hearts did not play like a side that merits being bottom of the league. Had a neutral watched that game and was asked which side do you think is bottom of the league and which side do you think is in the top 6. They've said Hearts were the side that were in the top half, and that maybe Dundee were actually fighting relegation. Hearts did not look like they were a lesser team whatsoever. That's the kind of Hearts that people expect to see, and what we kind of really should see, to be honest, with that group of players. And yeah, listen, Dundee, I can talk all day about how bad Dundee were, but you have to give credit to Hearts on one account or the other. They were very good. They were really keen on getting it wide, particularly to guys like James Penrice. He was probably the Hearts man of the match for me. He has a hand in both goals that were set up. Blair Spittle as well. getting into pockets of space, dangerous crosses whipped in. And Shankland was clinical. Shankland, I don't think he had any other chances I don't think he had any other chances aside from the ones that he put in the back of the net. So I think what you're going to see is Hearts have turned the corner now. If Hearts play like that every game at Tynecastle, they're going to be just fine. In fact, I wouldn't even entirely rule them out of a run to get back into the top six. I can recall Livingston a few years ago. They got in the top six just from one great streak in the middle of the season. And sometimes that is generally all it takes. Hearts were 9 points away from sixth place. They won that game. So now they're closing the gap, albeit by a very, very little margin. There's nothing, if they can get the confidence back up, you have Shankland's scoring goals again, which tends to kind of coincide with their form, which I believe I've said in the podcast before. If everything now begins to get the gears moving for Hearts, if everything begins to get the rhythm back, everything begins to tick the right way, then yeah, I would be surprised to see them shoot up the league table and begin to really compete. They're probably, if we're going to be honest, they're probably well beyond the point of being able to get to where they want to be in regards to that third place rivaling Aberdeen. But top six in Europe is still very much achievable. This league is just so naturally tight. We talk about how poor Hearts have been all season, but reality is a couple of wins completely changes how that board looks. So no, I expect Hearts to shoot up the league. I thought they were very good. I thought they were impressive. I think now you're going to see things go their way a bit more. Shankland scoring is obviously huge. If he just gets the confidence back up, if he gets in the end of more chances, I mean, if in doubt, the one thing that's always stuck with Lawrence Shankland is he will finish half chances. He's always been a great and natural finisher, if nothing else. So, yeah, no, Hearts are certainly, for me, a team to watch. I think they'll be in the ascendancy. For Dundee, I just think it was a rare bad day at the office. This season, we've had maybe two of those already. A game away at Dingwall, we got beat 2-0. Didn't really do enough to threaten Ross County. Then we had a home game against St Johnstone where we went 1-0 up. Simon Murray opened the scoring, and we completely collapsed and allowed St Johnstone to get back in the game and actually walk out of Dens Park 2-1 victors, and probably with the most possession I've ever seen a St Johnstone side carry at Dens Park. So I think this was just another repeat of one of those 2 days. Now that is quite worrying in itself, but I do trust that this Dundee team will learn. One of the factors I kind of consider myself would be that when you look at Dundee's lineup last season compared to now, we've essentially had to rebuild the entire defence, really. Last season we had Ricky Lamy, we had Joe Shaughnessy, Owen Beck, Owen Dodgson, Aaron Donnelly, even Cammy Kerr involved in spells. All of them are out of the picture now. Joe Shaughnessy is still at the club, but he's been injured all season. He's not expected to be back until at least January. And that's a big blow being your captain as well, but a real leader, cementing your backline together. And even Trevor Carson's had a real knack with injuries as well. John McCracken's done well to deputise initially. This season, I think, has been a bit more hot and cold. But he's essentially had to rebuild that defence. Billy Camacho's a new signing. Clark Robertson, again, currently injured, a new signing. Ethan Ingram, a new signing. Ziad Larkesh, when he was playing before his injury. Finlay Robertson is a right-footed centre midfielder by trade. Now he's getting played out in the left wing. The right-back position is changing between Jordan McGee and Josh Mulligan, if it's not Ethan Ingram. I think the only defender that we've got from last season who's now continuously playing just now is Antonio Portales. We've got Ryan Astley as well, who was signed last January, but he didn't really feature at all last season. And this season he's made his breakthrough. So we've essentially had to build the entirety of the defence all over again. And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, we say it all the time, when a manager builds a new team, it needs time to gel. Now, just because the manager's been there for a longer period of time, the group at the back is still completely new. So that in itself will still need time to gel. And that's kind of been Dundee's biggest issue this season. We score a lot of goals, but we're conceding far too many as well. Only Aberdeen and Celtic, the top two teams of the league. Well, I think maybe Aberdeen have fallen down the third place now. I'll confess, I've not looked at the league table. I kind of don't want to look at the league table. But Aberdeen and Celtic are the only two teams in the league who have scored more goals than Dundee. Dundee's issue is completely down to not just the goals they concede, but how they concede them. And I think that's one of the factors that we have to take into account. And it's also still a very young team as well. So the team, I think there is progression. You are beginning to see a bit of a maturity there. We were in a rut earlier in the season. We lost 3 consecutive home games in the form of getting beat off Aberdeen, getting beat off Kilmarnock, and getting beat off St Johnstone. And that's a pretty difficult thing to break out of when you're on a losing streak. To break out of that, when you fall into a habit, that's how it starts. Really, it's a slippery slope, and they got out of it. And when we play at home now, we look capable of winning games. And I say capable of winning, we look capable of blowing teams away. We blew Hibs away 4-1. We blew Motherwell away 4-1. So I think there is signs there that the Dundee team can react. And yeah, there are certainly signs of progression. But I think for a lot of fans, there's still this aching frustration, surely in regards to the way that we concede goals. So that's got to be something they've got to look at going forward. And, what better time than now? Because it's been a very start and stop season with the international break. We play 3 games at a time. International break comes in, then everything has to come to a halt. Now suddenly there's the League Cup final. Now we're meant to play Celtic, so they've got to play the cup final against Rangers. So we get that weekend off. So it's very much the same again. We have that free week to press the reset button and we go again. It helps to get bodies back in from injury. We've got a couple of injuries. I mentioned Clark Robertson and Ziad Larkesh earlier. I think they'll be out for a bit longer. Same with Scott Fraser. But there's bound to be a couple of knocks that you don't really officially know about, I think, in around the first team. So, yeah, for Dundee, very, very bad day at the office, but not the end of the world. Not that it's acceptable, but not end of the world. And as for Hearts, just keep your eyes on them. I'm expecting to see a lot more of that kind of display going forward.
There we have it. There's Ethan's breakdown on Hearts finally seeing Lawrence Shankland not score. I mean, he has scored this season, but finally seeing him find his shooting boots. And as I mentioned before, unfortunately against Ethan's Dundee, but I'm sure, as you heard there, they'll be ready to push the reset button and go again pretty swiftly. Let's round things off then with our Aberdeen expert, Thomas, who is going to give us a bit of a lowdown. It did finish, of course, Aberdeen 1, St Johnstone 1. That's another dropped point or dropped points for Aberdeen and that early season run where there was a lot of calls for a title challenge. Has sort of maybe not panned out that way. Not that I think many really expected it. And Rangers potentially having the chance now to go into second, I don't think will be a huge surprise. And it's not over. Aberdeen could easily, switch it back on and battle Rangers now for second. We'll have to see what Jimmy Tilleen has up his sleeve. But I think, like Thomas is going to mention, there's a bigger project going on at Aberdeen, and they're probably a little ahead of schedule. But I don't want to ruin it, so let's let Thomas get into that one. Here he is.
Right. Dons. Been an interesting last couple of games. I think we all need to remember, well, Aberdeen fans in particular, that this project that is being undertaken by the management team, we're 2 years ahead of where we need to be. And the last couple of games, I think our lack of squad depth has been, defensively, I'd say, has been exposed. We need a lot of defensive reinforcements in January, I'd say, and a new striker, because there's been flashes from Kevin Nisbet this season, but I don't think he's particularly fit enough to keep his spot in the team. He's anonymous in every single game, but because games haven't really been on TV as much, I haven't had chances to watch Aberdeen games, but only through the wonderful Sports Sound commentary, open all mics. By the sounds of things, it's we're slow to get out the traps. Like Aberdeen's patient play in the last couple of months has probably proven to be too patient. I think there's particular players who have played non-stop this season, like Nilsson and Keskinen, who have played over 40 plus games this season um, already, and it's because of the Scandinavian seasons in Norway and in Finland. Keskinen, Nilsson in particular, he's a new dad. These sounds like excuses, I know, but we have been found out for. We found out a bit. I think Talene knows that, and you can tell in his interviews that he doesn't blame anybody. He doesn't blame external factors. He takes full responsibility, and I'm confident that he knows how to fix this. Roll on January. He had the Miovsky money to play with now, which is awesome. But yeah, Duan has actually, from when I've been able to watch the games back, well, mostly, highlights. I've been particularly impressed with Ross Doohan. Filling in Dimitar Mitov's boots this season is likely, well, it is a massive, massive challenge because Mitov has performed incredibly well for Aberdeen, exceeded all expectation. And yeah, I think Ross Doohan has been one of our man of the matches in the last couple of games, as well as Duke. I think Duke has proved himself in the last couple of games that he's a nailed-on starter in my eyes. I think from when this 2 week break cannot come close enough. It came at a great time for Aberdeen. So I would say, yeah, I would say Duke and Keskinen are our best options on the wings, but I think we need, actually, to go on to defence. Oofed. Rubizic has been found out for being a head case. Malloy has shown good. He's got potential. I think he can go very, very far in football, but he's still inexperienced, and he needs an experienced head next to him. And yeah, McGarry's not the answer. He was poor. I thought he would have fit into this system because he's quite pacey and he likes getting a ball in and skipping past his man, but his final ball is poor, very poor. So, and also Jack Milne, I'll give Jack Milne his credit. He's, I think, specifically against St Johnstone, showed particular intent because some of the players in the last few games look like they haven't. Well, they're tired, they're shattered. A lot of them have played a lot of games, and yeah, this has been the first run of games where we haven't had much of a rest, and it shows that, I think. So this 2 week break, this winter break, has come at a great time for Aberdeen to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and roll on Hibs. Which, if you asked me 2 months ago, can Aberdeen beat? Well, actually, yeah, can Aberdeen beat Hibs? I would say 100%. But now I'm not so sure because, well, against Celtic they look quite decent, and they look quite decent against us. And they've had a couple of games this season when they have looked relatively okay. So yeah, nervous for that, but yeah.
Well, there we go. That was Thomas rounding us off with his thoughts on Aberdeen and everything going on there, of course, after their 1-1 draw with St Johnstone. Thank you to Thomas. Thank you to all of our guests. Jenna for giving us the roundup on Motherwell, of course. Matty jumping in with his Hibs analysis. We had Ethan giving us the Hearts Dundee roundup. Alex on Dundee United versus Kilmarnock. Myself, of course, on Rangers, Ross County, and then, as I mentioned, Thomas rounding us off at the end. Slightly different this week, as I mentioned. I hope you did enjoy it. We will be back to normality next weekend with all fingers crossed on that one. We do have some big games coming up in the meantime, of course, which I'm sure I don't have to tell many people about. So it was a weekend where 3 of the bottom 4 picked up points in Scotland to give themselves hopes of rising back up the table. with Rangers moving just 2 points behind Aberdeen for that second place berth with a game in hand. Celtic motoring on as always, and the middle of the table being as exciting as ever, where everyone takes points off each other as always. On to the cup final at the weekend, where we ask the question, can Igaman play a part in toppling Celtic, or will it be business as usual for Brendan Rodgers? Thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you next time.